Opinions stated by various contributors to the Money and Business Show and related programs are not to be considered as endorsed by Radio Shalom, its employees. Visitors to this program are urged to use their own discernment to draw their own conclusions. Please read your prospectus and consult with your own investment advisor.
Live from the studios of Radio Shalom, 1650 AM in Montreal, Canada, the city of Joie de Vivre, the world capital of culinary variety, and the home of the Montreal Canadiens. This is the Money and Business Show with your host, Samuel Izerzer. Every week, Samuel and his guests discuss money, investments, financial services, and the world economy. Over the next hour, you can have your questions about business and personal finances answered. So call 514-738-4100 extension 200 to speak with Samuel and his guests. And now, here is the host of the Money and Business Show, Samuel Izerzer.
Money, and business. Karen Hudes is the graduate of Yale Law School, and she worked in the legal department of the World Bank for more than 20 years. In fact, when she was fired for blowing the whistle on corruption inside the World Bank, she held the position of senior counsel. She was in a unique position to see exactly how the global elite rule the world, and the information that she is now revealing to the public is absolutely stunning. According to Hudes, the elite use a very tight core financial institution and mega corporations to dominate the planet. Karen Hudes says the goal is control. They want all of us enslaved to debt. They want all of our governments enslaved to debt. And they want all of our politicians addicted to the huge financial contributions that they funnel into their campaigns. Since the elite also own all of the big media companies, the mainstream media never let us in on the secret that it's something fundamentally wrong with the way that our system works. So what did Karen Hudes blow the whistle on? Well, in 2007, Karen warned the U.S. Treasury Department and the U.S. Congress that the U.S. would lose its right to appoint the president of the World Bank if the current American president of the World Bank did not play by the rules. The 66-year-old gentleman's agreement that Europe would appoint the managing director of the IMF and the U.S. would appoint the World Bank president ended in 2010. My name is Samuel Izerzer for the Money Mission Radio Show on CCRS 1650 AM Montreal. Thank you for tuning in to the Business Show. And today we have Brian Wolofsky. How are you?
I'm great, Sam. How are you this afternoon?
Oh, fantastic. You know what? I can't wait to hear from her. You remember Everett Stern? We had Everett Stern on the show.
Absolutely.
And he spoke about HSBC and all these thugs and conniving shysters.
There have always been whistleblowers, but what we're finding now is the themes are very much... the themes are the same. Who are taking advantage of people in less powerful positions, but the scope has just grown tremendously, and the retribution by those who literally have money and power against those who say hello,
and you know what,
is growing.
And more of these whistleblowers are coming through, but they're also scared. They're also scared what's happening. In the United States
there's
now, the
very
whistleblowers,
real violence and danger against
no kidding.
them. Nobody wants their money and control threatened.
Yes. So you know what, she has a lot to say, so I don't want to say too much. You and I can go forever. But I'm going to introduce Karen Hudes, who studied law at the Yale Law School and economics at the University of Amsterdam. She worked in the U.S. Export-Import Bank in the U.S. from 1980 to 1985 and in the legal department of the World Bank from 1986 to 2007. She established the Non-Governmental Organization Committee of the International Section of the American Bar Association and the Committee of the Multilateralism and the Accountability of the International Organization of the American Branch of the International Law Associations. I want to welcome Karen Hudes. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. What a lovely introduction.
You know what? There's a lot more to it, but like I said, I had to cut it down to about a third. So I really want to thank you for actually being on the Money and Business Show. But tell us a little bit more about who the World Bank and what was its purpose for this financial institution to be born out of.
It's hard to know where to start. Let me start at what was going on in 1944, which is when the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund were created.
Yeah.
They're called the Bretton Woods institutions because there's a ski resort in New Hampshire, United States, where 44 countries came and established what they call the Bretton Woods institutions. And I fell for the stated purpose of the Bretton Woods institutions when I graduated from the University of Amsterdam with a degree in development economics. I landed there because I was a kid in high school and college during the Vietnam War era. And when they were saying love it or leave it, I thought that I really wanted to get out. So I went to Amsterdam and studied development economics, but I had always wanted to be a lawyer, too. So I applied to Harvard and Yale and got into both of them and wrote a letter to Harvard saying that I was going to go there, but I had in mind that I really wasn't. And so I went to Holland and I got admitted to the University of Amsterdam, and I wrote Harvard and said I'd like to take a deferred admission because I think it would be good to study economics in Holland. I wasn't saying anything about the Vietnam War to them, but you know, they knew that a lot of people were leaving the country at that time. Anyway, so Harvard wrote back and said, you told us that you were coming and then you didn't show up, so even though you wrote us a month to tell us, you know, beforehand to tell us that we should admit somebody off the waiting list, we're never going to readmit you. So anyway, that didn't bother me too much. It bothered my parents a lot, but it didn't bother me. So I stayed happily in Holland for a couple of years, and then I started realizing that this Yale Law School credential could be very, very helpful if I wanted to do what I said I wanted to do. So I took a leave of absence from Amsterdam and went and started law school, did a year at Yale, and then I took a leave of absence from Yale and went back and finished up in Amsterdam. This is not to bore your listeners, but just to give them an idea of what I had in mind right back from the get-go.
No, that is perfect, Karen. I needed to know that because it wasn't really clear about your past. Go ahead.
Well, you know, people right now are questioning my motives. They say if a person was at Yale, then they obviously are part and parcel of this cartel. And yet people have to know that what drew me to Yale was the fact that I figured that credential could serve me very well with what I had in mind. I've been remarkably consistent.
So why the World Bank? Why the World Bank?
It turns out that I was absolutely right about the World Bank because the real purpose for the World Bank was to make sure that the world's wealth that was being hidden by Ferdinand Marcos, who put the world's wealth on deposit for 50 years.
From the Philippines,
That's because he wanted to extinguish all rights of the what's known as the black nobility. Those are the rulers who have bloodlines that stretch all the way back, and those people think they're entitled to whatever is going on, whatever wealth there is, whatever is good, it belongs to them, and the rest of humanity is welcome to have the crumbs. And just so people have a good understanding about how these people move through space, they have dug all kinds of bunkers because they don't care if there's a nuclear holocaust. They will simply go into those bunkers. They've outfitted those bunkers and equipped them so that they think that they will be able to inherit the earth after there's a scorched earth and the rest of us are eradicated.
Unbelievable.
That's how they move.
You know,
that's what they think.
I thought the World Bank Group, you know, had like two goals. This is what I was reading on their site. One was end extreme poverty by decreasing the percentage of people living on less than $1.25 a day, and still going on, and promote shared prosperity, you know, for fostering the income growth of the bottom 40% for every country. Now, this hasn't happened. Actually, it's the opposite. Right?
What happened is that the World Bank institution was hijacked by this banking cartel. And
who is the banking cartel?
Describe the banking cartel.
Yes, go ahead. Who are they?
Are you going back to Walter Wriston?
No.
Okay. Do you remember Walter Wriston? He was head of
I've forgotten totally who he is.
Bank of America. He
that.
became head of the World Bank in the 70s. That's who I was thinking you were referring to.
But Brian,
look, the World Bank that I know, I got from Aaron Broches, who was the longest-serving general counsel, and he was a Dutch lawyer who was working in the Dutch embassy when the Bretton Woods Conference was held. And if you read the history of that conference, you'll see that he's mentioned in a footnote. And so he gave me the operation manual for the World Bank. He told me that the key to the World Bank is not the presidency, but the legal department, because the legal department is sitting there right between an internal board of directors. The World Bank is it's a different international organization than any other, and the IMF. They're really the same institution. It's just that they're across the street from each other, and the Europeans get to handpick the managing director of the IMF, and the United States gets to handpick the president of the World Bank. But that ended in 2010. But anyway, let's get back to what the World Bank and the IMF were created to do and about their board of directors. Their boards are resident and run the place. And the biggest 8 countries, the biggest economies, get to handpick who their executive director is. So that's the United States, Germany, France, United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, China, Japan. I always forget somebody else. But anyway, the top 8 economies. And then the rest of the countries get clumped into what is called constituencies. And if you read what the articles are, which is supposed to govern how the World Bank and the IMF are run, the boards, the countries themselves are supposed to run the place. And what happened 1 year into the existence of the World Bank is that there was a special understanding that the board was going to serve as a rubber stamp and was going to vote any proposal by the president up or down. They were not going to be an active board. And I went to them. I went to the Russians, actually, in 2009, and also the Norwegians. You know, I had gotten to know the boards very, very well. They had wanted me to be their general counsel, and I was prevented from doing that, but I stayed in touch with them, and I told them that I understood full well what was going on. Let me give you an example of what was going on. When the president of the World Bank, who came from the Pentagon, Paul Wolfowitz, gave a 30% pay raise to his girlfriend, the board didn't like that, and they fired Paul Wolfowitz. And just as they were firing him, any member of the board who went to the same bordello that Eliot Spitzer had frequented when he lost his governorship, that was the New York Madam, were told that that information was going to be made public if they went forward with it. I found this out because I happened to be in Holland, I speak Dutch, when the man who represented the Dutch government, who had formed the Dutch government, that's Herman Wijfels, went on record in a newspaper, and then the next day, his predecessor, Ad Melkert, who by that time was working for the UN Development Program, Ad Melkert was interviewed on a television program, and they said, Ad, is what Herman said true? And Ad said, well, you know, they never really bothered me because I'm kind of a boring guy. But yes, it's absolutely true because I knew other executive directors who were very unhappy about this blackmail. So when you're hearing now about the blackmail that is coming out of the National Security Agency, this has been going on for a very, very long time. They're only going public with it now. But I came back from Holland. First I went to the dean of the Yale Law School. Then I went to the Congress. I had been dealing with the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, which at that point was chaired by Joe Biden, and had Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama as junior senators on it. I went to them with this information, and they said, go to the Treasury Department. So I went to Kenneth Peale, and Kenneth Peale did absolutely nothing. And I told Kenneth Peale that the chickens were going to come home to roost. Let me go in at great length at the most important information that I'm going to give your listeners.
Do you know what, Karen? Can you just, we have to pay our bills. Can you just hold on to that thought? And I'm going to ask you again for that information, because I'm sure it's extremely important information. But just stay on the line. I'm with co-host Brian Wolofsky. My name is Samuel Zerzer for the Money Mission Radio Shalom, CJRS 1650 AM Montreal. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.
We're back, live in studio with Samuel Azurzer in the business headquarters of Radio Shalom, 1650 AM in Montreal, with the Money and Business Show. You have questions about your personal finances? You need advice in making sound financial decisions? Samuel and his guests are ready to take your call at 514-738-4100. It's the Money and Business Show.
Yes, we're back with Karen Hudes, is a graduate of Yale Law School, and she worked in the legal department for the World Bank for more than 20 years. Now she blew the whistle on the World Bank. How are you? How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. Go ahead. I'm sorry I had to interrupt you there just before the break there, but you had some important information to tell us.
Yes, but before I get started on that, let me just talk a little bit about whistleblower and what that actually means in my context.
Okay.
There are a group of World Bank whistleblowers, but we're not really whistleblowers, actually. What we are is, think of what happened during World War II when governments went into exile, the real governments. That's who the World Bank whistleblowers are. Because what I was telling you about what Aaron Brochus told me, he told me that the legal function in the World Bank has a very prominent role to play. And so when I was illegally fired against the advice of the U.S. Congress, by the time I was fired, I went up the corporate ladder. The thing about a whistleblower normally is that, they're viewed as people who can't really get along inside their companies, and they're disloyal and they're exposing the secrets of their companies. That's not the kind of whistleblower I am.
Okay.
A lawyer who works for a company that issues bonds on the capital markets, and the World Bank has $180 billion of bonds on the capital markets, is required to make sure that accurate financial information goes to the bondholders. That's their terms of reference.
So you own a share? You own shares of that? Is that?
I own a bond. Yes.
No, do we all do?
That's what I did. When I was fired illegally, I bought a bond.
Oh, so you bought a bond?
I sued the World Bank, and I sued the World Bank's accountants, KPMG.
Okay, so they had no choice but to give you all that information, that audited information. Is that right?
They had no absolutely no standing whatsoever to fire me, because the U.S. Congress told them in 2007 that they should not fire me. And then when I was fired against the wishes of the U.S. Congress, that's contempt. 3 senators asked for a Government Accountability Office audit, Senator Lugar, Leahy, and Bai. And when GAO withdrew from that audit, I started writing the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions. As a bondholder, I went to the Serious Fraud Office of the United Kingdom.
Okay.
Now I've set the stage. Now let me tell you about this power transition model that I was talking about. But no, let me talk a little bit about the other World Bank whistleblowers. One of them is an architect. He was involved in when the World Bank was renovating its offices and warned everybody that there was a huge cost overrun coming. He was fired for his trouble. And when we included him in the list of World Bank whistleblowers, by now he's working on mega projects in China. He came back and he said, no, he said, I'm not a whistleblower. I simply did what it is that an architect on a large project is supposed to do. And that's exactly what I am. I did exactly what a lawyer inside an organization that issues bonds on the capital markets is supposed to do. So now the position that I have is not a whistleblower. The position that I have is promote rule of law in the international financial system, because the World Bank and the IMF sit in the very dead center of the international financial system.
And Karen, let me ask you, how people like us, the little people, how we're supposed to fight this?
There's no such thing as a little person.
I mean, no, I'm not saying we're little. I'm just saying we're the masses, and, they're just thugs. Like you said, they're just thugs, and nothing's going to stop them.
Let's talk about information. Let's talk about information flow for a minute.
And also I wonder...
These thugs have bought all of the mainstream media, and they are trying to
CNN, Fox
the
News?
Entire world.
What, the CNNs of the world, the Fox News?
Yes, but in the meantime, people have woken up to the fact that these thugs are gaming the system through inaccurate information in the mainstream media. So the mainstream media is it's just losing its listeners. And when you have surveys as to how much credibility remains,
not much.
You now know that they have lost any credibility. That's why the Syrian conflict did not explode into World War III. That was what was on their agenda. And so we're just, we have taken over the credibility of the mainstream media. You should see the interviews that I've had. Let's talk a little bit about the interview that I had on Russia television today. I've been on there 3 times. One of the interviews was with Abby Martin. Now, how much coverage has mainstream media given to what I'm telling you?
Did you say Russia? Television?
Russian Today. They're on they're on YouTube all the time. You never see them?
Yes.
No.
They have a very wide coverage in the United States.
Yeah.
And one of their broadcasters interviewed me, and then a few months later, fast forward to what was going on in the Ukraine, she resigned on air. She said, RTTV is propaganda. Yeah. And so, I just went to town on her. I said, no, RTTV is the only major TV station that told Americans what I'm telling them about this corruption.
But why did she quit? I remember, I've seen that and I've read that. She did quit because she thought that it was just all propaganda by the Russians.
No, that was just a total sham. Yeah. And so what she has done is she has discredited herself. She had a nice following. People thought she was somebody with integrity. But she was simply, not up to the task. I don't know whether she was threatened. I don't know what motivated her. But surely she knew that the news that she was giving American citizens was far superior to anything. Let me tell you what's going on with me and the mainstream media. CNBC finally called me a couple of days ago and asked whether I wanted to go on their show. I said, of course, I'd love to. I've been waiting to hear from the mainstream media.
Yeah.
What is it you have in mind? They were going to put me on a panel of about 10 people. I was going to be given a 1-minute soundbite, and they were going to talk about whether or not the United States was a superpower anymore or not. So then I said, okay, you're going to give me 1 minute. Let me tell you what I can manage to say in 1 minute. And then I started talking about what went on with the U.S. credit rating, that there is now a 4th credit rating agency that's owned by Russia and China, and that the U.S. credit rating is going to go down because of how the mainstream media is not telling people what's really going on. Well, that was too much for them. So they said, oh, never mind, we're not going to put you on. And also they were insisting that I take their limousine to their studio. I said, I am not going to get in your limousine. You think I'm nuts? But anyway, so let me go to the point that I was going to make about the power transition model.
I don't even understand that. Why wouldn't you take the limousine?
Because I can tell you about all the different threats I have had. And I am not getting in the limousine of a company that's owned and controlled by the...
So you've been threatened before, right, Karen? You've been threatened.
I mean, I don't want to bore your listeners. My life consists of nothing but. I just don't intimidate. That's, I was captain of the NYU fencing team. All you have to do is threaten me, and I go into my fencer's stance and I stab you from the other side.
Yeah, you were telling me the other day, or actually last night, that you were, you got elbowed just recently, right?
Yeah, at the end of the reading of the Megillah.
Yeah, it was on Sunday, right, for Purim.
But let me talk about the power transition model, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. At the World Bank in 2004, a political scientist named Jesuit Kugler came to the World Bank with his power transition model that he had developed as a prominent political science expert. He chaired the political science department at Claremont University. And this model, what you do is you ask somebody who's an expert in a problem, who are the stakeholders? Who are the people who can influence the problem? How powerful are they? Where do they stand on the problem? And how distracted are they about this problem? Is this something that's, number one on their pile of things to do? Jesuit called that salience. So I took Jesuit to Ghana, and we modeled why a freedom of information law wasn't getting passed in Ghana. It turned out that the Germans were financing that project, and the Germans wanted a perfect law, and the Ghanaians weren't ready for a perfect law. So what you had was you were not going to get anywhere. Anyway, I then asked Jacek whether he would model rule of law at the World Bank, which he did. And that model showed that the United States was going to lose the gentleman's agreement if we didn't start playing by the rules. And I could tell that we weren't playing by the rules because I was also country lawyer in the Philippines. The man who brought me to the World Bank, that was Ibrahim Shihada, who was an Egyptian lawyer who, before he became the general counsel at the World Bank, had been the general counsel of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And I have maintained my ties with the Egyptians. I won't go into, I won't bore your people, but let's get back to the power transition model and what I did with it. I warned the Treasury Department when I was not making any headway on the cover-up in the Philippines. This was after the East Asia financial crisis, and we were supposed to strengthen the financial sector in the Philippines. So the second largest bank, Philippine National Bank, was supposed to be sold to the private sector. And instead what happened was the man who owned Philippine Airlines, Lucio Tan, grabbed up employee shares, a huge block of them.
He knew Joseph Estrada, right? The former president.
They would play. They would gamble cards at night.
Okay.
They were cronies. And so he grabbed up all of these shares without telling
disclosing?
Securities authorities that he had more than 10% of the shares of Philippine National Bank, that he broke the securities laws. And at that point, the investment advisors said that there was no way to have a transparent privatization because of this block of shares that ended up with Lucio Tan. So I told the man who was in charge of the lending program in the Philippines, Vinay Bhargava, that the loan conditions could not be met and that he should tell the government about this. And I drew up the letter for him to write. So instead, he had me reassigned. At which point I went up to the Dutch executive director and I said, there is corruption going on in the Philippines and I'm being reassigned. And so together with Peter Stack, we went to see Jim Wolfenson and told him about these shenanigans in the Philippines. So Jim Wolfenson said, I'll take care of it. And his way of taking care of it was to call up my boss. This fellow, my boss, had been hired because I told Larry Summers he was a good guy and should be hired. So when that happened, I went to Peter Stack and I said, this guy who's supposed to be the general counsel is aiding and abetting corruption instead, and he wouldn't have been hired if I hadn't told Larry Summers he was a good candidate. So that's when Peter Stack and I went to see Jim Wolfenson. Anyway, so
Jim Wolfenson was the head of the bank at the time?
Yes. So when Jim Wolfenson called my boss, Ko Yung Tung, who wouldn't have been my boss if I hadn't recommended him to Larry Summers, who lived on the same block as me because his kid and my kid were in elementary school. I would go and talk to Larry Summers during PTA meetings. After what happened, and I ultimately got fired from the World Bank, every time there was a PTA meeting, I went and I gave Larry Summers a piece of my mind. That guy couldn't go to a PTA meeting without me telling him about how terrible things were.
He was definitely scared. But you know what, Karen, just hold on. We got to take a station break here. Again, I'm with Karen Hudes. Used to work for the World Bank, and now she's telling all the truth that's going on there. And also, I'm with Brian Wolofsky, my co-host. My name is Samuel Zerza from the Money and Business Show on Radio Shalom, CJRS 1650 in Montreal. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.
We're back, live in studio with Samuel Zerzer in the business headquarters of Radio Shalom, 1650 AM in Montreal, with the Money and Business Show. You have questions about your personal finances? You need advice in making sound financial decisions? Samuel and his guests are ready to take your call at 514-738-4100, extension 200. And now, back to the Money and Business Show.
We're back with Karen Hudes, is a graduate of Yale Law School, and she also worked in the legal department of the World Bank for more than 20 years. Wow, what a story you're telling us. I'm telling you, Brian. I
have nothing to say. I'm just sitting here.
You know what?
My job is easy today. I just Karen, shut up and listen.
I just want to tell you, Karen, it's the first time I see Brian really quiet. He's just listening to you.
Eyes closed, intent, listening.
But you know what, Karen?
What I want to know, Karen, is let's fast forward to what was curious to me, and I'd like you to give our readers your website, because I was reading it, and what struck me, my job is easy today. I just Karen, shut up and listen.
I just want to tell you, Karen, it's the first time I see Brian really quiet. He's just listening to you.
Eyes closed, intent, listening.
But you know what, Karen?
What I want to know, Karen, is let's fast forward to what was curious to me, and I'd like you to give our readers your website, because I was reading it, and what struck me on reading your website was you were not doing anything wrong. You were doing everything right. And it seemed to me that if I had been in your place, I would have been thinking, wow, I'm pointing out to my superiors what's going on in the Philippines. They should be patting me on the back and saying, oh, yeah? Thank you, Karen. Thank you for informing us. And instead, you just got into more and more and more trouble. And it made me think like you were like a lobster in a pot where the water just kept getting hotter and hotter, and you didn't realize how much trouble you were in and how much was coming back against you and not the people doing the really nasty stuff until it was essentially too late. So I'm curious, how did you get into this trouble? Were you shocked by the response of the people around you? And where are we at now?
Yes, those are great questions. I can tell you that I was very surprised when Senator Lugar wrote 3 letters to the World Bank saying, don't fire this lady, and I was fired. My sensation in all of this is that of a person in an elevator, and I kept thinking that I was on the top floor and that the problem would be resolved, because don't forget, I had this very powerful power transition model. And it started telling us in 2010, when I got my statement up on the UK Parliament website, that we were going to have rule of law, and it's 90 to 95% accurate. Elaine Colville worked at one of the entities inside the World Bank. There's 5 of them. The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is the main one. That's the one that was created, and that's the one that was given power over the world's gold. That's the most important thing that we should be talking about right now. We should keep our money on the gold, because if we do not get that gold out of its cloak of secrecy, which is where that banking cartel has put the gold,
where is that gold?
We are going to have another dark ages.
Where is the gold? I mean, so many people are talking about, Fort Knox, there's just no more gold.
No.
Is there gold there? There's no more gold at Fort Knox.
No.
Where is the gold?
No. The gold is primarily in the Central Bank of the Philippines. That's about 600 million
you mean the
metric tons.
You mean the world's gold is there? Or just
yes. Yes, but there's also about more than 200,000 metric tons in the Union Bank of Switzerland, and then there's more gold that's buried in strategic places
in the
Philippines.
In the Bank of International Settlements, is there any gold there too?
Okay, the Bank of International Settlements are the thugs that Ferdinand Marcos stole the gold from. And then he put it under cloak of secrecy in these accounts for 50 years so that all of their legal claims would be extinguished. I'm telling people about what the law is, and I've been using the law. I've been using the securities laws, because if the World Bank financial statements are fiddled, then all of the bondholders, $180 billion worth of bondholders all over the world, have recourse against all of their ministers of finance. I've gone to all of the states. I've gone to the attorneys general. I'm now at the level of the county executives. I've gone to the Parliament in Canada many times. There's a group called the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform in Canada. I'm working together with them. I'm working together with a number of people all over the world, because although the mainstream media is controlled by this banking cartel that has bought up 40% of the net worth of all of the 43,000 companies traded on the capital markets, and they pull down 60% of the earnings. We know this from the Federal Institute of Technology study.
Yes, I read about that.
Accurate data.
Yes.
But let's get back to this power transition model, which I've been using. it started predicting that we would have rule of law because coalitions would form. And I have been in touch with all of the executive directors on the board. I was their inside candidate who they wanted to be general counsel. And when I was thrown out, it didn't prevent me from continuing to keep them informed. And I've been informing all of the embassies for many, many years about progress. And they know that this is their gold, and they're entitled to it. They also know that the board of the World Bank should be taking the initiative and running that institution, because Ferdinand Marcos was the one that created it to watch over the world's gold. That's its real main function, and that's what it's doing.
But why do you care about the world's gold? Seems to me we've gone off a gold standard a long time ago.
This has nothing to do with gold standard. There is a very good interview that I'd like your audience to watch. I'm interviewing Antal Fekete, who's the foremost monetary economist. He's the one who gave the keynote speech when in South Africa they were celebrating 100 years of the centenary of having discovered gold. Gold is currency. It has been currency for millennia. And paper currency is nothing but toilet paper. And our paper currency is about to crash. We're about to go into something called permanent gold backwardation. You can tell this three different ways. One way is because of the amount of gold in COMEX. Another way is because the price of gold for immediate delivery is higher than the price of gold for delivery in the future. And the third way is because there's no longer leasing of gold by the central banks. That stopped in July. We are about to get into a situation where people who hold gold will not sell it at any price because paper currency is toilet paper. And unless and until we get the gold out, we are going to go back into the Dark Ages. That's what created the Dark Ages.
You mentioned an interview.
And we are on the edge.
You mentioned an interview. Would people find it? Would they YouTube you? And what is this other person's name?
Yes, his name is Fekete, F-E-K-E-T-E, and I'll send you the link for that interview.
F-E-K-E-T-E, Fekete what?
Yes, he's a Hungarian economist. He actually was a professor in, I think it's the University of Newfoundland in Canada for many, many years until he retired.
So if people YouTube Karen Hudes and Fekete, F-E-K-E-T-E,
we'll look that
they
up.
should find this monetary
Right. I just wrote an article which has many links to the documentation that I'm citing.
Yeah, what is your website?
Let's get back to the power transition model.
What's
Karen,
your website?
Yeah, what is your website? So like that, our listeners can actually go and find it.
Yes. My website is KAHUDES.net, and you'll see on there a contact page, and I answer all my emails. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll be happy to give you the documentation.
That's
I am all about documentation.
That's KAHUDES.net.
.net. WW. Yeah. Karen, can you speak a little bit more about, you talk a little bit on the on your website and also in your YouTube videos. There's this war going on between currencies. Can you talk a little bit more what's going on?
The race to the bottom, how everyone's trying to get their currency devalued.
Well, the U.S. dollar is going to implode one of these days. We don't know. I mean, there's going to be two more implosions coming up. It's going to be the government debt, that's for sure, and there's going to be the U.S. dollar. We just don't know when.
See, and I disagree with you.
No, I know you
disagree.
Depends
on how quickly they grow their GDP.
I said 5 things are going to happen. One of them was the stock market is going to collapse one day. It did, and
but everyone knows that.
Then you had the discretionary spending crashed also, and also you had the real estate. But there's two
Brian
more.
And Sam, you're both wrong.
We're both wrong.
You're both wrong.
Okay.
There's not going to be any haircut. There's not going to be any currency war. I'm going to get back to the power transition model.
Yeah.
One of the things I did in 2008 was I spoke to the then senator of Nebraska, Chuck Hagel.
Okay.
And I told him about this model and the fact, I was very concerned about the fact that the United States kept shooting itself in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no need for that. And why was that? We were not doing what was in our security interest, because this power transition model, which you can read, said that the United States has got to maintain its alliance with its countries, such as Germany, such as Russia. And when we do that, the Chinese are going to sit and wait patiently for another 100 years before they assume power. Why would we irritate the allies that we need? It made no sense to me whatsoever.
So what's the answer?
I said to him, there was a book signing, one-on-one, in 2008. I said that the United States had to start working with our allies, that we were unilaterally shooting ourselves in the foot. And, of course, that's what we're doing with this quantitative easing. That's a fancy word. People use these words to bamboozle everybody.
The printing of the money, right?
Printing paper.
Printing paper.
It's just printing toilet paper.
Okay.
Why would we unilaterally crash the dollar, which is what quantitative easing is doing? So what happened when Chuck Hagel became the Secretary of Defense was I went to the Inspector General of the Defense Department, and I said, there is a power transition model that's in your department, and I want to speak to those people. And so the very next week, I got an email from those people, and I started saying, why are we unilaterally surrendering our military might by creating a weak dollar? And at a certain point, those folks said, we don't want to be the middleman between you and Chuck Hagel. You find another way to talk to him. So I did. I've been dealing with Chuck Hagel in about 4 different ways. I've been using the public contact with the Defense Department. I've been using the person who's supposed to be the liaison with the U.S. Congress. I've been using Assistant Secretary Peter Verga, who is the liaison with the Homeland Security Department. And the reason I've done that is because 4 governors are on a special governors council that also deal with the Homeland Security via the Defense Department. And the co-chair is my governor, Martin O'Malley, in Maryland. I've been dealing with him. And, I didn't let him off the hook either about the fact that he's not protecting people in Maryland who owned World Bank bonds. So I've been on top of all of these people because they are not representing the interests of the United States. They are representing the interests of the Vatican, the Black Pope.
So
that's who they're
the
serving.
Jesuit. Yeah, the Jesuits.
That's right.
But I don't want to.
And so I've been documenting all of that.
Yes, I know. I've been reading a lot more what's happening. I mean, people are blaming the Jesuits for everything, and the money goes from Bank of America back to England and back to, I guess, to the Vatican. But why is the U.S. dollar being devalued, and why are they going that route? I mean, do they really want to make that one world order? Is that the end game?
That's not happening. That's not happening. I didn't mention that one of the other counterparts I'm going through is General Martin Dempsey, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Martin Dempsey had a town hall meeting on the 2nd of December. And John F. Kennedy had printed dollars issued direcally by the Treasury Department,
the Treasuries,
which
right.
means that we do not pay interest on our debt.
And Abraham Lincoln as well.
Exactly. And so when I asked Martin Dempsey why he was not accepting the offer of the authorized signatory, there's a German lawyer banker who has become the authorized signatory of the gold that's in the collateral account, and he has allocated 170,500 metric tons of gold to underpin U.S. dollars that are printed and uncut also in this collateral account, which the World Bank and the IMF are supposed to be supervising. So Martin Dempsey ducked my question on the 2nd of December. So I reiterated that question on the 14th of March when he had a second town hall meeting. He ducked that question as well. Veterans Today erased my question from their comment section, and so I wrote a letter to the editor saying, whose interests are you serving, Veterans Today, if you're erasing my question? So this time they left the question up, and I put a lot of information in my question, including the fact that Martin Dempsey is a Knight of Malta, and also talking about the Inspector General who did not reinstate Major General Michael Carey, commander of the 20th Air Force, who was fired under a pretext. Why was Major General Michael Carey fired? He was fired together with Vice Admiral Tim Giardina in charge of the Navy's nuclear arsenal. What these heroes did was they prevented a nuclear device from detonating over Charleston. They had it detonate instead 600 miles off the coast.
When did this happen?
And they were fired for that.
That was
October 8th.
That was last year, right, when Obama fired a few generals?
Right, and I asked John T. Reimer why he was allowing these generals to be fired illegally. And John T. Reimer is also a Knight of Malta. So I got a phone call from somebody in the
What does that mean, Knight of Malta?
Who is the Knight of Malta?
You keep saying that. What does that mean? What's the implication?
Okay. Everybody gets all confused when I talk about the Jesuits. They say all of these people are simply priests, and how could priests be running the United States? The way they do it is they set up these secret societies. Remember Kennedy's speech about I got a phone call from somebody in the
What does that mean, Knight of Malta?
Who is the Knight of Malta?
You keep saying that. What does that mean? What's the implication?
Okay. Everybody gets all confused when I talk about the Jesuits. They say all of these people are simply priests, and how could priests be running the United States? The way they do it is they set up these secret societies. Remember Kennedy's speech about secret societies? The Knights of Malta are one of the secret societies. There's a whole alphabet soup of them. There's Knight of Equestrian Order of Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. There's Sacred Military Constantinian Order of St. George.
These are all little secret societies. The skulls.
Order of the Garter.
Yes.
I mean, this is all alphabet soup, but people, when they become members of these groups, they have a huge ascent to their careers. They get put in positions that they have absolutely no training for, just simply to do Rome's agenda and take orders from the Jesuits.
Karen,
That's what that is.
Okay, Karen, we're just going to take a couple of minutes break over here. Again, we do have Karen Hudes, who's a graduate of Yale Law School, and she worked in the legal department of the World Bank for more than 20 years. My name is Samuel Zerza for the Money Mission Radio Shalom, CJRS 1650 AM Montreal. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.
We're back, live in studio with Samuel Zerzer in the business headquarters of Radio Shalom 1650 AM in Montreal with the Money and Business Show. You have questions about your personal finances? You need advice in making sound financial decisions? Samuel and his guests are ready to take your call at 514-738-4100, extension 200. And now, back to the Money and Business Show.
We're back. We're Karen Hudes. Used to work for the World Bank, and also she claims she's a whistleblower. But I wanted to say hi to you again. And Karen, I wanted to ask you. I know you can. There's just so much information that we're going to ask you, but one of them that I really wanted to know is, you speak a lot about the gold. Where's the gold and all that? It's just why is Goldman Sachs always shorting gold? I mean, they're always these naked shorts. If you know what I'm talking about, they're selling the gold so they can depress the gold. How come they just don't let it rise where the marketplace is?
The reason that they're doing this, manipulating the price of gold, is because the U.S. dollar is losing its status of international reserve currency. And by manipulating the price of gold, they're trying to prevent this. But obviously, that's not working. You've got the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that are no longer paying for the trade among these countries with dollars. Instead, they're using offsets, and they're paying the difference in gold. But let's get back to this issue about the military, because that is critical.
But what does the military have to do with the World Bank? And are you putting everything in context? Is that it, or what? I mean,
okay. What I'm trying to explain is the power that's underpinning the Jesuits and their secret societies. I got a letter from a retired, I guess he was a Marine. His name is Robert O'Bannon. And what he wrote was that this scheme that they have, this network of control, depends on two things. It depends on secrecy, and you can hear now I'm getting access to the public. So that secrecy is breaking down. The other thing it depends on is the military might of the United States. And as long as you can have Knights of Malta placed in key positions and allow them to remain unchallenged and to unilaterally surrender the military might of the United States to the interest of the Vatican, then they will get their way. But what you have now is that these Knights of Malta are outed. And that's why we can say with absolute assurance that the United States is not going to allow its dollar to crash. Why would we allow Federal Reserve notes to disarm this country? Why wouldn't we continue our military strength? Why wouldn't we allow our allies to help us, which is Germany? I had an interview on a very important business website, which has 1.5 million readers per month. And at the end of the interview, what the interviewer asked me, he said, is there something you think that our listeners would be especially interested in? And that's when I started talking about the fact that military helicopter of Germany had buzzed the consulate of the United States in Frankfurt. And so then I went into what the motive was. Mm-hmm. It was because Germany was trying to inform the citizens. It was a shot across the bow. Germany is a very important ally, which we are losing. Look what's happening in the Ukraine now. Germany had negotiated, had brokered an arrangement which was unilaterally jettisoned by the United States. Is this in the United States' interest? It's in the interest of the Vatican.
I'm not aware of what arrangement you're talking about.
You don't know about it, but there's a very good German journalist named Lars Schall who wrote an article on this. He also did the best interview on me, so I would commend your listeners
spell
to
Schall?
read Lars Schall's. Yes, I'll give you the link to that. Lars Schall's interview with me, and you should also read Lars Schall's discussion about what's really
How do you
happening
spell
in
Schall?
Schall.
A-double-L. Now, can we just ask you a couple of questions that are really on our mind that we prepared, that we'd really love to ask you, kind of short snapper questions, because we have 6 minutes left, and we'd really love to ask you.
Yes, I've pretty much covered what I had to say. I'm happy to take your questions.
All right, so Sam and I have a bunch of questions. The first thought is, and these are all like 1 minute answer questions. Do you have any thoughts on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the fact that so many are saying that it's basically a takeover of the world's ability to protect its own domestic businesses by global businesses? Any thoughts on that?
That's their intention, but the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a non-starter. I went to a meeting in Washington. You know, they have these brown bag meetings. That's when I established good relationships with Japan. We haven't talked about Fukushima or whether Fukushima could have happened
the disaster
through some kind of sabotage, or whether the backup generators that would have prevented the meltdown had been deliberately disabled by the Styx virus. So,
you mean Stuxnet?
No,
excuse me?
Wasn't
do you mean Stuxnet?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. Okay. And what was going on before Japan was punished by this wave that was generated artificially off the coast. That was that Japan was starting to break away from the banking cartel. So what you have is you have a top layer of treasonous elites in each of these countries that we're dealing with. And those treasonous elites are on notice that they are exposed, they are outed, and they are no longer going to be controlling the people in these various countries. All of the people are going to take their fiat paper currency and in a very smooth transition replace it with the gold that exists for the benefit of humanity that's going to be minted as the replacement currency.
Any last thoughts there, Karen? Do you want to tell our listeners? You have 30 seconds.
I just simply want to say that the chance that what I'm saying happens is 90 to 95% because we are basing this on that power transition model.
Okay, well,
we're right on course for this.
Karen, I'd love to have you again. That's Karen Hudes, is a graduate of law school, Yale Law School, and she worked at the legal department of the World Bank for more than 20 years. I want to thank you for being on the Money Business Show. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Brian and Sam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Again, my name is Samuel E. Zerzer for Brian Wolofsky for the Money Mission on Radio Shalom, CJRS 1650 AM Montreal. Happy capitalism, and God bless you all.